So, earlier this week, I was checking out GTA 5 after not playing for a while, and while I was loading in, I saw the standard things like CEO sales were paying out 2 times RP in GTAs, which is actually a pretty good way to get legitimate money in the game. But what really got my attention was what was on the headlines that day, and it was the usual, the date that GTA 5 was coming to the PS5, the trailer, the next gen upgrades, things like that. And then I ended up coming across this article here. A while ago, I did hear about Chicago wanting to ban GTA because of all the carjackings, but as if that wasn't enough, it then ended up being the whole state of Illinois wanting to ban GTA. So I'll just show you the rest of the article. If an Illinois lawmaker has their way, then Grand Theft Auto and other violent video games could soon be banned in that state. Why? Well, along with the usual moral panic excuses, it seems that Representative Marcus C. Evans Jr. believes GTA could be partially responsible for recent Chicago crime waves. This proposal, House Bill 3531, is actually an amendment to the 2012 law that prohibits the sale of certain video games to minors. Under the new bill, restrictions would be expanded to prevent all sales of what documents refer to as violent video games. In the bill, a violent video game is described as a game that allows a user or player to control a character within the video game that is encouraged to perpetuate human-on-human violence in which the player kills or otherwise causes serious physical or psychological harm to another human or an animal. As you have probably gathered, that's a very vague definition that covers a lot of ground in a lot of games. However, there is one game that Representative Marcus C. Evans Jr. has referenced most often as a part of his ongoing push to get the amendment passed. Grand Theft Auto and other violent video games are getting in the minds of our young people and perpetuating the normalcy of carjacking. Evans says carjacking is not normal and carjacking must stop. Why is Evans so focused on the not normal? Thanks for clarifying that one mark crime of carjacking. Well, it seems auto theft is on the rise in Chicago. CPD reports from January claim that police in the area responded to 218 carjackings in January of 2021. For what it's worth, 2020 was also a banner year for carjackings in Chicago, as the number of auto theft cases that were reported that year more than doubled the previously reported 2019 figures. The amendment is supported by Chicago's Early Walk, who started Operation Safe Pump, a program designed to protect gas stations, shopping centers, and other highly targeted areas for carjacking attempts. Much like Evans, Walker believes that banning sales of GTA and similar titles could help slow the rising crime numbers. I feel like this game has become a huge issue in this spectrum, Walker said. When you compare the two, you see harsh similarities as it relates to these carjackings. Does this amendment have a chance of being passed? Well, you should never say never, but if previous attempts at passing similar laws are any indication, then it's highly unlikely that this bill will gain much traction beyond the many studies we could point you to, which find the correlation between violent video games and real-life violent acts is thin at best. The fact is, widespread media like this one almost never get passed. Here's what former Supreme Justice Scalia wrote in response to a 2011 attempt to restrict the sales of violent video games in California. Like the protected books, plays, and movies that preceded them, video games communicate ideas and even social messages through many familiar literary devices, such as characters, dialogue, plot, and music, and through features distinctive to the medium, such as the player's interaction with the virtual world. That suffices to confer First Amendment protection. While you may wonder if the specific rise in carjackings could make it easier to identify GTA as a problem, that doesn't seem likely. Reports regarding the rise of crimes in Chicago and other major cities across America in 2020 and early 2021 point to a variety of factors, and video games are not among them. Furthermore, there's actually been a decrease in certain major crimes across Chicago and elsewhere over that same time period, as is typically the case when these things come up, though most people can't help but focus on the fact that we've been dancing the same dance ever since Jack Thompson waged war against Mortal Kombat in the 90s and got more people talking about the impact of video games on the youth of America. Ultimately, the conversation never amounted to much more than a bunch of noise. Speaking of conversations, the internet is having a field day with the idea of GTA being banned in Illinois.
Losing objective butter.
So, yeah, as we just saw, people weren't too happy about GTA being potentially banned in Chicago and even Illinois. Honestly, I believe that if people really care about it this much, it should be up to the parents to look at what their kids are playing. It's a very simple solution. If you're whining about GTA being too violent because your kid themselves plays it, who bought the game for them, who didn't realize the kid was playing the game, or who even let themselves be fooled into thinking it's a racing game or some other excuse like that. First off, contrary to popular belief from people who have never touched a video game in their life, playing a video game will not make you want to carjack and run over people just chilling on the sidewalk or get into a shootout with cops. Little Billy sitting in front of the TV for 3 hours a day and yelling at people for not clutching up in Warzone isn't going to make him lose his humanity or desensitize him to violence, contrary to what these people will make you believe. At worst, it might teach him skills the kid might not need, but that's it really. Honestly, the people who make these kinds of arguments don't get the point of video games. They let you do things you can't in real life. They aren't made to inspire you to do the things that you see in them, although some people do blur those lines and take inspiration from them. It wasn't always the game alone. It was the contribution of factors that almost always ends up amounting to mental problems. But I'm going to get away from this landmine and talk about the people who just in general think that, oh, nobody should be able to play violent video games because I myself cannot handle them, and they're just bad influences on all of society. Not all of us find things like violent video games to be too much. Things like violent video games aren't even all that bad, and honestly, that's why violent video games are M plus and ratings like that, because you have the choice yourself to see if you want to buy a game or not, and it warns you the content you'll see in the game. And I mean, as a grown man or woman, I think the least of your worries is violence in a video game. If you have the time to be complaining about things like this, you just have too much free time on your hands. And I personally feel that GTA isn't even all that bad. To a young kid though, the torture scene, it might be a little upsetting. And maybe to a few adults. But obviously there's strip clubs and guns and all that. But we're talking about GTA 5 here. It was never the most kid-friendly game. And honestly, playing GTA, it hasn't changed me one bit. You know, I've never been walking down the street and decide I want to pull some GTA type beat behavior, you know, stick up convenience stores, throw a right hook at somebody, steal a person's car, none of that. And honestly, I feel that when people like this refer to banning GTA, they're only talking about story mode, because online is just a whole different situation. I mean, online is just the most sci-fi shit you have ever seen, right? We're talking about flying bikes here, deluxos. We're talking about submarines, attack helicopters. It's so different from when the game first came out. At least back then, you know, you could do stuff. You didn't have to worry about people constantly killing you or anything like that. These days, you load into a lobby, you're walking from your apartment to your car, you're probably going to get bombed by some 12-year-old in a jet. You're probably going to get blown up by some 12-year-old in a fucking flying bike while you're driving down the highway. Something's just going to happen. Something's going to go wrong. And especially if you're in a full lobby. In a full lobby, it's almost guaranteed somebody's going to kill you when you don't want to be killed. And honestly, online is just one of the most toxic GTA Online is one of the most toxic online games I've ever played. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say on that situation. I mean, it's just something different. But anyways, with that being said, if you liked today's video, I know it was a short one, and I mean, I think I like this because it kind of keeps people's attention, and I feel like if I make a whole 20-minute video, it gets boring if I keep repeating the same topics. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. Leave a like, sub, hit the notification bell.
We are losing.
And also this video, I decided I'm going to run it with an outro. So yeah, look out for that. And I might actually put outros in future videos, but an intro, I don't know when I'm actually going to make one. But yeah, with that being said, this is Erudite, wondering how the hell banning GTA would cause a dip in crime rates, and logging off.